the master on all of this. But basically, he's riffing on the concept that if you go out and just build something, that's around about the most expensive way possible in the world ever to find out whether it's the right thing to build. You build it, you put it into the market. That's super, super, super expensive. One of my passions is about like not wasting engineering time, because it's such a rare resource. I reckon more rare than the most precious metal in the world. Engineering time is even more precious and rare than that. And there's a statistic out there that somewhere between 50 and 90% of the things that we think are good ideas, all that stuff like, yeah, let's build that. It's, this thing is on our roadmap. That's an amazing idea. Let's build it, get it into production. Turns out actually to be a really crap idea and does not have the impact that we thought it was going to. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any impact. It just means that it has less of an impact than we thought it was going to. So is there a better way? And if we spend a little bit of time just thinking about feasibility up front, like, is this thing actually feasible? Is it actually going to create the impact that we want to do, that we want to get? Then maybe we should invest that time up front, because we're about to spend the most precious resource known to man, or known to humankind. And this is where this notion of dual track development comes in, the idea that we do some discovery and we do some delivery, and those kind of cycles are happening in parallel. What do I mean when I say feasible? So there are 5 dimensions of feasibility. Is something valuable? Will people actually pay money for it? Will your customers actually pay money for it? If they won't, then you can put stuff out there and live on VC money for a while. But as the US is finding right now, that eventually the music stops and you run out of money. Is it usable? Can people actually use it? Is it technically feasible? Can we build it? Can we actually make it come into existence? And is it viable? And where viable means, can our business support it? So can our customer support team support it? Can our sales team support it? Can we get it into market? And what we want to do is spend a little bit of time. Now, this is not about upfront requirements gathering. What we're trying to do here is just do enough of a smell test that those 5 dimensions, and I forgot to say ethical, so sorry, the ethical dimension. If we build this, will we end up on the front page of every newspaper in the world? That's that ethical dimension. Don't do that, it's bad. We want to spend a little bit of time just gathering enough evidence that we've got a smell that those things are actually okay. And if we get this thing into delivery, then it has some reasonable chance of success when it hits the market. And that's so that we can find those 50 to 90% of things that are actually turn out to be a bad idea and nuke them first. If we nuke them after just spending a small amount of time, we're not wasting that really precious resource. How many of you have heard of the term feature factory? Most people. Interesting. So this is a great article from John Cutler. If you haven't read it, I strongly suggest you do. And this is the world where we're just churning out features. Our teams are just building what they're told. There's this long list, longer than known hours in the universe, of things that we want to build, and our teams just churn through and build them. And I don't know if you can maybe a bit hard on the screen here. It's just right in the cross of those 2 screens. But there's a stakeholder sitting out on the right-hand side going, outcomes? Like, are these actually doing anything for our customers? Like, we're just building stuff. What's it all for? Maybe we don't want to do that. So what's a better way? This is kind of a really brief introduction to what ideal product discovery looks like. So we've got a customer, our user, and there's some job, some outcome that we want to help them do. We've got a bunch of opportunities to do that. There's never just one way of achieving an outcome for a customer. There's usually multiple ways of doing it. And there's a bunch of solutions that we could possibly do to get that particular outcome for that customer. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the best one. We're not just trying to find, is this viable or not viable? That I'll talk about and why that's important a little bit later in the talk. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to put all these options out there and find out which is the one that we should actually be pursuing, which is the best way that we can help the customer achieve the outcome that they're looking for, so that we don't pick the worst one. There's that red path down the bottom there. That maybe that's the worst opportunity, the worst solution that we could give to that particular customer. Maybe that's just really, really bad idea. If we just did that, we just put that into production, then we're potentially on the road to failure. Well, actually, we just don't know. Maybe we'll fail, maybe we'll succeed. But we don't have time for that. We're too busy. We're in this feature factory. We're churning out all these features. Our teams are just rocketing along, building feature after feature after feature. when the heck are we going to have time to look at all those N different ways that we could possibly solve a problem? Like, when is that ever going to happen? Let's get out of there. And I'm going to talk a simple-ish 3-step guide to solving that problem. First, okay, so the situation I'm assuming is that you've got this team, they're super busy. You start talking about the idea of, oh, I want to get you guys going with product discovery, and they just look at you like you're a space alien. Like, when are you ever going to have time? So start a conversation just about the things that they're working on right now. How is the world going to look different when that particular feature is done? What change are we going to see in the world? And that will probably move into a conversation about things that we might measure, metrics like, is this going to increase retention? Is this going to increase our acquisition? Some metric, something we're going to move. How's that world going to look different for our customers? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to shift the conversation from the how and the what, just that giant list of features, which is usually just a what, over to the why. And that then gives us an opening to go and have a conversation with our stakeholders. Right, we've got this feature. Hey, stakeholder, we've had a look at it, and we reckon that this is going to move our retention needle. And the stakeholder looks at us funny and goes, "That wasn't what I was talking about. This is an acquisition play." Now I understand what you're trying to achieve. This is our why. We're digging back into our why here. Well, maybe if it's acquisition, maybe there's these other ways of doing things as well. It starts to open up that problem space. These are ways of just cracking into those conversations with your stakeholders and sort of broadening their minds. Step 2, find the face palms. I mentioned before there are these things that we build that just don't have that 50 to 90% of things that we build that just never have the impact that we thought we were going to. Every organization, I will absolutely guarantee it, if you have a product in market, you will have one or many of these face palms. Every organization has these internal stories. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn those into stories that you can use to start building your case to introduce discovery. And this is where there's a reasonable chance that if we'd spent some time testing outcomes or feasibility up front, it would have actually helped us. So as an exercise, I tried this fairly recently. Myself and David Stokes in the front here, who we were working with a customer, working with a client, consulting client. And what we asked them to do was to go through all of the things that they'd built over the last 24 months and just give us a rough idea that if maybe they'd spent a little bit of time up front on that, what time might they would have saved. Now, of course, this is a very theoretical, hindsight-based exercise, so it's we're just trying to get like a really rough idea here. And so we basically took a bunch of cost, was time, which we kind of converted into cost. Assign a probability to that, because of course, hindsight's 20/20. Of course, if we'd looked into that, we absolutely would have found that problem. Probably not actually. Maybe there's 10%, 20%, 80% chance of that happening. So multiply the cost by the probability, sum that all up, and you've got a number that starts to give an indication of what your return on investment might be of doing that discovery work. We didn't actually manage to finish the exercise with this particular client, but we stopped when we got to about 6 months worth of time saved over 24 months. And that was immediate, like, maybe there's something in this discovery. There's a second part to that story, which I'll come back to a little bit later. So there must be a better way. So this is where you can go, I know about this thing called discovery. Here's how we go about doing it. Start having that conversation about, maybe we can look at all these different options, maybe opportunities and solutions, spend a little bit of time. And again, this is not about spending a lot of time on this kind of thing, because we're trying to gather evidence, not proof that the thing is worth doing. You might want to merge it with a bit, often organizations have like some sort of gate that's a business case or product requirements document or something up front. Use discovery to populate that. Often these things say, what evidence do you have that this is really a problem? And usually there's some like complete bollocks number that's written there. AJ's smiling here because I think he knows the particular situation I'm talking about. That business case is often just somebody's written it in a hurry because they wanted to get the thing into the feature pipeline. Well, you can use discovery to elaborate on that. You can use discovery to feed into that business case and have that stuff put down. So that now we're starting to bring discovery into your kind of BAU processes. So it's starting to look like things that you already do. And again, a reminder, we're looking for evidence and not proof that something is actually feasible. Maybe we should find a test case to try this out on. Maybe don't try and get this across the organization immediately everywhere all the time. Pick a particular case that we can try running discovery on. And you have to be a little bit conscious when you're doing this that someone somewhere in the organization is actually doing product discovery. There's someone, it might be a salesperson, it might be an executive, it might be a leader somewhere in the business, whoever's feeding into that backlog, that long backlog of features that are churning through our factory. Somebody's doing that, and inside their head they're going, customer problem, user problem, solution. And the thing that's happening between their ears, which they may or may not be conscious of, is they've actually run through that opportunity solution tree themselves. Whether whether they're conscious of it or not, they've gone solution, right? Okay, let's do that. And you're trying to get that out of their heads. But just keep in mind that thinking is actually happening. It's not like the organization just puts stuff into your backlog just for giggles. Usually there is a little bit of logic in there. So just be conscious of that, because what we want to do when we're having discovery is we want to be having compare, contrast conversations with our stakeholders. See, that stakeholder, they've gone from this customer problem to solution, and when we put it through discovery, we may tell them that their baby is ugly. And that's sometimes a confronting conversation, but we don't want to tell them that their baby is ugly. What we want to tell them is that it would be better looking if do this rather than that kind of thing. So, we've got these different options. This also helps discovery to be perceived as adding value in the organization, not just being a gate. We're taking the ideas and sort of elaborating around them, building on them. It's actually adding value to our organization. It's not just an impediment that some product manager or some team said that we should do. I'll acknowledge David James on this one because he's been keeping me honest right now about compare contrast conversations. So thank you, David. Cool. So we sold the dream to our stakeholders. We've got buy-in to get discovery going. But at the beginning of the talk, I was talking about involving the team. Like, how does that all work? Don't do it like this. So one pattern I've seen for organizations that have started to do discovery is that there's a small group of people, maybe just a product manager or a product manager UX designer. They go off and do discovery, do all this work, research and whatnot, and then go, ta-da, team, right, do this. We've done discovery on it. We've been good. The team goes like, what? Why? Particularly technical feasibility. Often in that situation, the product manager does just discovery around that sort of the valuable set of those five elements. They forget about technical feasibility. What's a better way? Actually bringing the team forward into discovery. Actually have people within your team, engineers, QAs, support people, whoever else is in your team, actually working on those different lines through our opportunity solution tree. Somebody's doing a test around this particular hypothesis. Somebody's out there looking at different opportunities. Someone else in the team is looking at different jobs that we could potentially do that might be more valuable. Bring everyone together, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our team engaged in this process. Oops. Change the order, damn it. When are they going to have time to do that? How many people in this room are product managers or product something? Cool. Okay, it's your job to figure out when. You need to find out, because you've got this backlog, your team is working on user story, tech debt, production support. Hopefully you've got some buy-in from your organization to free it to actually do this discovery, but that has a cost. That actually has a real cost. We're asking our team to do real work. This is work just like delivery work. So as a product manager, you need to prioritize that. You need to decide that we're going to spend 10%, 20% of the team's time on this discovery work. A few rough statistics. I'm working with a team right now. I'm actually acting as a platform product manager for a team. We just went through a big discovery cycle. We had 2 1-hour discovery sessions per week, plus time for the team to do sort of proof of concepts and whatnot outside of that. So it's around 10-ish% of the team's time during a sprint. And that was because I saw the value in doing it. A because I wanted, it was actually genuinely something tough that we were trying to work on. But also by getting the team actually engaged in it as relatively complex technical domain, I wanted as many people in the team as possible exposed to that so we were all learning together. And also because why do you want more humans involved? Well, we're trying to test many ideas quickly. We're trying to rocket through that opportunity solution tree as quickly as possible. Marty Kagan talks about, 20, 30 ideas a sprint, like, real fast, real fast, real fast. I heard a statistic from Intercom. They spend 60% of their team's time on discovery, which is huge. Who's doing this? So I keep talking about the team here. There is a school of thought. Some people in the room probably going to throw some things at me at this point around the notion of the product trio: the product manager, the designer, and the engineer team lead. I'm proposing that should be a wider group because you're trying to get everyone involved. You actually need some horsepower on this. You need to prioritize it so that the team actually has time, but get more eyes on it. That doesn't mean everyone all the time, of course. You need to have some common sense, but I do advocate for having a wider group involved. And also because often when we ship something, it's not just technology. It's technology plus customer support process. It's technology plus some install process. It's maybe some software plus some hardware. You actually want to engage a much wider group than just your engineers and your testers. Because sometimes the best outcomes come from actually not writing code. First, actually write no code. Maybe you could get this outcome through a piece of marketing. And again, that's about going through the different opportunities we have. Maybe opportunity 1 to increase acquisition as a marketing campaign. Opportunity 3 is do some engineering work. Test those different ideas. Which is the one that's going to be most suitable for you? Because hashtag no handovers. There is a real temptation for people to work ahead of the team. We're just going to break off a small group of people and we're going to work ahead of the team. At some point, that work is going to finish and we're going to need to actually bring that work to the rest of the team. And so there's a handover that happens. Information gets lost in translation. People aren't bought into the outcome. We're not buying into that principle of actually motivating our team well. And it's really, 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 really easy to underestimate the cost of a handover. I've worked with so many teams where we've all gone into a room, around a whiteboard, around a screen, talked about the outcome of discovery. Yeah, team, everyone's bought into it. And then a week later, I realized that nobody in the team actually understands the outcome. And, maybe I could have done a better presentation to them around the outcome. Maybe that's my fault. But, time and time again, I found that when people are actually researching the outcome themselves, there's not just some person telling them what to do. They're about 1,000 times more likely to take that information in, involve me, and I'll learn. And I hear a lot sort of the idea that if we could just recapture what we were like as a startup, it's prevalent in large organization. We just want to get back to our startup days. Things were so amazing in our startup days. One of the sort of unwritten things there is that back in those startup days, everybody was literally starting together. There was no team going off and delivering something else while people were doing discovery. Everyone was actually working on it because we weren't doing delivery yet. We were actually bought into the problem. And that's what gets that notion that, we were so much more effective back then, where that effectivity is the motivation, it's the buy-in. And make it visible. We've spent a bit of time sort of justifying the existence of discovery in our organization, but it's really, really, really easy for sort of, we get this process kind of running. About 3 months later, CEO marches in and goes, right, we need to do this. It happens every time. And you need to be able to have that pushback, show the value of the things that, there's all these bad ideas that we're filtering out through discovery. Look, this is really important because we're stopping ourselves from doing dumb stuff. And, that starts to, doesn't entirely solve the problem, I hate to admit. Your CEO will still come on with, hey, we absolutely need to do this. But it hopefully helps them to understand, maybe we should spend a little bit of time thinking about that thing first. One of the organizations I'm fortunate to work with right now, Harmony, we've managed to get our executive team saying we'll put stuff into discovery. They don't talk about putting stuff into delivery. They talk about putting stuff into discovery. And that's because we've had some monumental facepalms and some things that we've put through discovery that turned out to be dumb ideas. A statistic, if you've ever spent time with me, I've probably told you the story 100 times, so apologies. Probably about 18 months ago, we had about 8 items in our discovery pipeline. 6 of them turned out to be a bad idea. We had 3 hungry teams that were all ready to pick up their next thing for delivery, and suddenly we're like, "Oh my god, what do we do?" Quickly put some more stuff. Got some stuff through, got them going. Phew, crisis averted. But it was a realization that actually wasn't a bad thing. The fact that we killed those 6 things up front meant that we could have. Each of them were probably at least about a quarter's worth of work for a team. We just saved ourselves a massive amount of engineering time. It was probably worth millions of dollars to the business. So it's just continue and making that visible to the organization means that they don't forget about that value. I told you there was a second part to that story earlier on around the sort of the sizing and cost and probability. So before we'd had that exercise, we sort of looked at what their challenges were and thought, obviously it's discovery. You need to be doing discovery here. This is why you keep continually falling on your faces. And so we put together this presentation and we thought it was great and did this presentation to them. And then we're a bit kind of shocked at the end of the presentation where the organization said to us, "Oh, we do that. We have a process for discovery already. It's called this and it was very well thought out, but we just don't do it." The hell? It was a very interesting conversation. And through that exercise, we convinced them that, that's actually why we need to do it, because it solves these problems. And, we quantified it for them. So, this was a very, very large, very mature, very onto it kind of organization. And they managed to, with a very, very good discovery process, and they managed to forget it and just reverted back into that mode of, we should just build these things because we don't have enough time. We need to get into delivery. There's no time to do this. We need to get into delivery. As I was saying earlier on, 6 of those 24 months they probably could have used better if they spent a little bit of time up front. And that's probably a conservative estimate. The other thing that visibility helps you with is getting more people to opt in. I mentioned earlier about the group involved in discovery is probably wider than what you think. It might be a customer support person. It might be a finance person. It might be a legal person. One thing I've instituted at some of the organizations I've worked for is the notion of a discovery review, or including discovery in a sprint review. So you get all your stakeholders along, talk about the things they're in discovery, and inevitably you get somebody putting up their hand. "Oh, you guys are looking at that. That's really interesting. Can I be involved in that?" And suddenly there's a whole domain, a whole area of your business that maybe you'd forgotten about who's now engaged in this process. And that might be the savior. The legal person might go, "Hey, can I get involved?" And they tell you, "No, you can't do that because, law, whatever," not ending on front pages of newspaper, as I mentioned earlier. Or they might say, "Actually, well, and here's a way around it." And you could have just saved yourself a whole bunch of time and risk and pain. But this is never going to work here, right? We're in this feature factory. We're still churning through all this stuff. Like, how on earth are we going to get to this state? Well, as I mentioned and earlier on, someone somewhere has got that discovery tree sitting inside their heads. They've done that translation from customer to feature. Is it healthy for your business that that's just one individual? We already talked earlier on about, how we justify the return on investment. Is that really healthy? Are we actually taking a massive business risk by not doing this? And then the second aspect is that if you're not doing discovery, you're doing it in delivery, or worse, in production. You're finding stuff out as you just spent really expensive engineering time, build all this infrastructure, put it into production, and we've done our discovery. Great. Yep. Most expensive way possible to do it. Are you being responsible to whoever's funding you if you're operating in that mode? Now, that's not to say that as part of discovery, you might actually put real experiments out into the wild, but low cost things. If you're doing these as high cost, high fidelity, production quality stuff, that's the most expensive way possible to learn whether or not that was a good idea. So, coming back to my original point, Agile Principle 5, build products around motivated individuals, give them that environment, that support, and that trust, and we're going to get better outcomes because we've got our team bought into this through going through that discovery process, through involving as many people as possible. No handovers. Our team is bought in. Because what we actually want our team to do is we want our teams to say, we shouldn't do that. We want to give our teams the power to say, dumb idea. Not just because they feel like it, not just because they want to do some engineering cool stuff, because actually we believe through our systematic process that this is a really dumb idea. And for the organization to respect that. And that is really empowering to a team. They're not just feeling like stuff is being done to them. They're actually feeling like they have control over their destiny. They can say, this is a dumb idea. We should not do that. But instead, we should do this. So I said that compare contrast thing is also really, really important. Just the one, do not do is not a great way to a stakeholder, very confronting, telling them their baby is ugly, telling them but you're not going to build their baby. That's bad conversation. But giving our team the power to say, no, we shouldn't do that. We should do this instead. That's my talk. End on a controversial statement, as I like to do. If you're not doing effective discovery, you're never going to be agile, in my opinion. You're never going to be customer centric as well. That's a whole nother story. All right, questions at the back. As sort of standalone discovery sprints. So the question for people on the phone, just remembering to repeat the question, is what do I think of discovery sprints? I think that there's a risk and a balance there. If there is something that's really, really, really chunky to get through, stop the team doing delivery, focus them on doing just some discovery sprints. The pattern of discovery sprints that I am really anti is the notion that we take out a few people from the team and let them go off and do the discovery sprints. That's that's a bad pattern. A good pattern is, and actually, it kind of my example that I mentioned around at Harmony where we had 8 things in discovery, kick 6 things out. That was what we were going to do. It's like, okay, cool. Well, we're panicking, flailing to get some more stuff in discovery. We need more discovery horsepower. It's just the next thing that the team works on. They're not doing any delivery at all. We're going to spend time on discovery together. Good question. Thank you. Jim. I'm glad you asked that. So a couple of things. So the question was, how do you make it visible to your stakeholders? What are some techniques around that? So as I said, organizations have introduced the notion of discovery reviews. At the moment at Harmony, we do that as we do a discovery review immediately before our main sprint reviews, but we're actually starting to shift things out of that discovery review into the team review. So we actually want discovery to pop up as part of the sprint review that the team are doing. As well as doing that, we actually do discovery grooming with a set of executive stakeholders as well. So we do a regular roadmap review with them. And that has 2 parts. The first part is reviewing what's in delivery. Second part is reviewing what's in discovery. Like I said, we're fortunate to be able to have that mindset of we put things into discovery. And so we work with our CEO, with the other senior leadership team to go, right, these are our discovery priorities. And that makes it really, really, really visible what's going on. And in that meeting, we say, this is the stuff we've learned, because we want to make those learnings really, really visible to them. Trying to get them out of that hippo mode of just telling people what to do. If we can, I didn't really touch on it in the main part of the talk, but there's a real trust element here. Like if your team is trusted to have an opinion, people won't tell you what to do. They'll trust that you already know what the goal is. To get out, hopefully mostly get out of your way, let you get on and do it. Earning that trust is so important. But unless you sort of manage to get yourself out of the feature factory where you're only trusted to build things, you're never going to have that opportunity to earn that trust. And so that's why that visibility piece is so important. So it's executive stakeholders reviews, sprint reviews, just any opportunity to shout the stuff from the rooftops. Is it every Friday you have drinks and we talk about the discovery work we've been going on. Whatever you're allowed to do, whatever you can do to make it visible to as broad a cross section of the business as possible, not just the other engineering teams, not just your senior leaders, your bring your customer support team and your sales team, whatever structure in your organization is. Cool. At the back. Yeah. So the question is that the discovery operates in this sort of incomplete information kind of space. We never have enough information to make a firm decision ever. It's just life of a product manager. That's actually a really, really, really good question. It's about getting enough evidence, but not so much that you're spending too much time on it. So a few different answers to that question. The first one is I talk about the amount of time that we should invest in discovery and make that really clear to the business up front. We're going to spend, this is fairly small, we're going to spend a day in discovery on it. This is quite large. It's actually worth us spending a month in discovery on it. Get that sort of buy-in first about how long we're going to spend on it. And that sort of tries to hold back the executives going, just get on and build it already. Come on, it's this is obvious. We should just do it. If you give them that time box, at least they've got some confidence that you'll come around to their way of thinking, and you'll just get on and do it already. And hopefully, of course, what will actually happen is you'll come back to them with a better idea. So that's kind of the first step is time box. Second thing is, how you're doing discovery. What information are you actually gathering? Making sure that you've got that full spectrum picture. You've got all the data that you need, and which is direct contradiction to saying you've got incomplete information. Have you got what you need, or can you find proxies for it? Can you find proxies for the data that allows you to make the right decision? It's never perfect. It is really hard. Sometimes you will have arguments to sort of say, well, you don't have enough data to prove your point. You're just operating on hearsay. It's a difficult conversation. There is no right answer to that. So it's just trying to come up with as credible story as possible. But as I was saying in the talk, if you are giving them compare contrast decisions, you're less likely to trigger the what the hell response than if you just go, no, we're just not going to do this because it's a dumb idea. You get that way, and that way they can argue, well, actually, I think that other thing is better. Cool. Well, that's our other path through the tree. Maybe there's something adjacent to that might be better as well. Cool. Yeah, but it's not easy. I have to, this stuff is a bit of a dark art. As an example, as I said, I've come through a cycle of discovery with a team that I'm working with right now. Sprint 2, we found something, a big piece of technology that we just missed in our discovery. Stuff happens. And you have to manage the messaging around that as well, because you might get that blowback of like, well, how did you guys miss that? It's like, well, we were just doing this quickly. We were time boxing. We were trying to get through that stuff quickly. Stuff happens. So it's, safe to fail environments are kind of conducive to this. Unsafe to fail environments, you are going to need to do something about that environment first. Cool. There's a question in the front, Jazz. So the question from Jazz was, what happens if your organization perceives that what you're doing here is just introducing another design gate? This is just just another version of big requirements up front. We're just waterfalling through this process. That time box that I mentioned before is actually a really good way to get around that and sort of saying, we're going to spend a day on this. This might be a month's worth of development, but we're going to spend a day on it. We're not going to overcook this discovery stage. And it's actually, as a product manager, you do have to be quite firm on that, because your team will want to go deeper than they have time available for. And so you have to hold a bit of tension there. Really emphasize that we're looking for evidence, but not proof. Just continually repeating that mantra, evidence, 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 but not firm, conclusive proof that this is the thing to go through. I mentioned before about sort of dovetailing it into like a business case kind of document. That can lead you a little bit down the proof kind of path. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So you have to be a bit careful about that. So, how you frame things so it doesn't look like you're looking for absolutes is really important. And including it as part of the work that the team does, not a separate stage, helps to get rid of that perception that it's just a mini waterfall. This is just work that we do. We spend 10% of our time on that. We spend 90% of our time on other things. That also helps to get rid of the notion that it is just mini waterfall. And that's the earlier question around design sprints is it's one of the things that I do find a bit scary about that is it creates that perception that we do design sprint, big amount of work, and then waterfall into delivery after that. And then the last one is just those lots and lots and lots of options that this is not just us validating an option and then delivering that thing. It's about us coming out with a whole bunch of different ideas and then picking the one that actually might be most suitable. AJ.
Teams of engineers are always going to need to build, whereas teams of kind of validate.
Yeah, really good question. So the question from AJ is have I seen sort of patterns of team structures, sort of, and I think you're kind of getting at like cross-functional versus non-engineering specialism versus value stream, that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. If you do have very siloed engineering groups, but what you need to achieve an outcome for a customer is a much wider group of people. Yeah, everything looks like, they have a hammer, everything looks like a nail to them. Absolutely. And that's not to say that you'll necessarily fail at getting sort of the fundamentals of discovery in place. It's just every option will look like build something. And that's what I was talking about earlier on, about creating that cross-functional kind of buy-in, getting people involved as much as you can get away with without restructuring the organization entirely. Get people to buy in just in their spare time in their organization, come in and help you out. And actually, there's a little bit of almost inverse Conway maneuver going on here, where you can then use that as a lever in your organization. If you're proving to them that in discovery you're continually involving this wider group of people, that maybe in delivery we should involve that wider group of people as well. Oh, and let's for giggles call that a value stream. And it's inverse, yes, and that's probably another name for it anyway, but it's a kind of inverse Conway maneuver. Christian, sorry, I had a question in the front. Yeah, so the question, and I honestly get this question as I've done a few variants of this talk previously. I get that question every single time, so thank you. I really should actually just have it as a slide in the talk. It's hard. There are some developers who just want to write code. They're not interested in this touchy-feely kind of customer-y sort of thing. And that's really tough, because I personally struggle with that as a product manager. Like, if that person only wants to write code and doesn't care about the customer outcome, about the thing we're trying to create, I'm not actually sure if I want them on my team. Maybe that's a bit of a harsh kind of statement. So interesting thing I learned ages and ages ago is one of the members of our product team community did a talk, and something she said has resonated with me for years, is that if you don't give the developer a vision of what you're trying to achieve, they're really smart, like they're really clever, intelligent people. They'll figure one out for themselves. And so that developer who's not getting engaged in discovery, they might have a quite different picture in their mind of what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve. And that may or may not align with what we're actually trying to do. And so I firstly take that as a scary kind of thing. So I'll do my best to try and persuade them, hey, can we spend a bit of time with this customer? Let's just try and get you to really understand the problem that we're trying to solve. And that's it. So sort of tackle it at that kind of surface level. And if I'm not getting anywhere, then I might escalate to leads or to sort of line managers or career developers for that person, to try and encourage them that, hey, if you're not behaving in this way, really caring about the customer, you're employed by this organization to solve problems for the customer, not just to write code, and try and tackle it from that angle and get that, a bit more horsepower around sort of coaching and re-education. And then there's people who maybe you just involve them in the technical feasibility part and leave them there. But even that helps as well. It's like that will actually be a relief to a lot of developers, particularly I think that the type of personality that you're referring to. It's like, oh, thank goodness I actually better get a bit of time up front to look at this thing from through a technical lens before I just get told to build something. It's actually really liberating for developers. And so that can give you that sort of lever point that you can pull on that lever to, okay, well, let's maybe go beyond technical feasibility into business feasibility. These are things we're trying to achieve, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, sometimes, okay, you're just not the right person to involve in discovery. We'll just leave you there and we'll have other people involved. I think it was Christian over the back. Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, what signal is that generating? Yeah. So for the people on the phone, the question was the fact that question's coming up a lot, and when I'm doing these talks, is indicative of something. Yeah, absolutely right. It speaks volumes to organizational culture about the level of resistance you get across a group of teams as to how frequently that happens. If that is endemic, then you've got probably a very potentially very engineering driven sort of product view of the world, that, it's we're about building cool solutions, not necessarily about getting cool products out there. I've worked for one of those organizations. It's a tough gig. And yeah, you have to address it from that broader culture kind of perspective. As I say, you can only go so far with sort of selling the dream to them, and sort of saying, look, you're going to be more motivated by doing this. They're like, whatever, let me write some code. Also, I mentioned earlier about find a test case. Sometimes actually just bringing people in, you'll start to see the sparks of the people who are engaged by it, and you can start sort of creating that sort of grouping of people who you can kind of rely on to be involved. And sometimes it just becomes a social thing where it's like, well, the cool crowd are kind of doing that, so maybe I want to be part of that crowd. And but yeah, it is like I was saying to the previous answer, it's hard. Sometimes it really speaks volumes to organizational culture about if that's happening. Well, I think there's a question over here.
Question is, you talked about
Good question. So I guess you'd think about this in terms of leading and lagging metrics. So we've got something that we want to try and increase retention. Like that, this is our goal, is to increase retention. What evidence can we gather that this is going to increase retention? The only way to find out for sure is to put it out there, and retention is a very lagging metric. And 3 months, 6 months, 12 months later, find out whether or not we still got people engaged in our product. We're only going to be able to do that through going to production. But are there signals that we can find up front that indicate that these people are more likely to be retained? There's a great example gets cited constantly from Facebook, which is that if a user takes these seven actions, they're far more likely to stay with the platform than if they don't. And so it's looking for patterns of use of what are our users doing currently that looks like the thing that we're proposing, that indicates it might have the effect that we're looking for. What are these leading metrics that we can find that give us some kind of hint that this thing might be successful? And then it's testing, getting prototypes out there, not just making sure you're not just having that conversation inside the four walls of your organization, or four virtual walls these days, I guess. Actually, getting out there, getting real users involved, but actually having spent some time, and this is where amazing user researchers are your best friend. What are those signals that we're looking for in our research that we might be onto something here? But it can be really tough, because especially if you've got a stakeholder who's like, no, we absolutely need to do this. This is absolutely going to lead to this outcome, and I believe it really strongly based on my 20 years in this industry, kind of thing. Gathering enough evidence to break into that argument is really hard. So it's about thinking about leading, lagging metrics, great user research, prototyping, testing, getting stakeholders involved in research as well. So if you're doing a research call with a panel of customers, get that stakeholder with really fixed ideas on that panel, hopefully in a way that they're not like jumping in and leading the witnesses and whatnot, but actually get them so that they can see it for themselves. Yeah. So for the people on the phone, sounds like it's got a lot of overlap with user research. 100%. I showed you that slide earlier on about the different dimensions of feasibility. Usability is one of those main things, but it's acknowledging that it's not just about UX. I've seen organizations who do what they call discovery, but they're actually just doing usability testing. There is business feasibility as well. There's technical feasibility in particular. One organization that springs to mind in particular, they did pretty reasonable sort of usability testing, but their engineers were always feeling thrashed because it then got through, yes, past discovery, it's all usable. Oh crap, we can't build it. And so that's why bringing all those perspectives to the table is really important. So so user research, usability, all those sort of disciplines around UX are really, really, really a crucial part of this, but they're only a part. Yeah, did so. So, this looks like the front end of a value framework. Yeah, 100%. That's absolutely what it is. And you mentioned earlier on about business cases are sort of a nascent form of that kind of thing, usually a really crap one. But it's that kind of thing. It's about actually spending that time assessing what that value is through all of those different lenses, including ethics, which is as I mentioned is increasingly important these days. You do not want to build something that it puts you on the front page of a newspaper. And with us doing more cool machine learning stuff, there's a real chance that we will blunder into that as well. And so actually devoting a bit of time to testing and analysis around that is really important as well. Question down the back. Yeah, so the question is that when you put that hypothesis in there, how do you define those success metrics? I'm going to fall back on the classic product manager answer of it depends. So firstly, having success metrics, actually not just randomly flailing at something, actually spending a bit of time understanding what those success metrics are. What those metrics are, how they vary across those 5 different dimensions will vary heavily depending on what it is that you're actually working on. But actually setting up that framework up front, what is the minimum evidence, you're mentioning before about leading indicators, what is the minimum evidence that we need to gather that indicates we're onto something, and actually having that conversation at the start. That conversation also often fleshes out a massive amount of assumptions that you're saying, well, what is our evidence that this is going to be successful? Oh, I thought it was this. I thought it was that. Oh, maybe we're talking about different things. It can flesh out a massive assumption, sort of set of assumptions around that. Doing some assumption mapping up front can kind of help with that too, actually. Get those assumptions out on the table, because then we'll have a better chance of defining what it is that looks like evidence. The questions? Oh, sorry. So the question was, where does requirements fit into this? Requirements and design is, obviously a critical part of any delivery, but you don't want to invest in too much in requirements first, because if you're wrong, that's just wasted work. And so it's fitting that in at the right point in that cycle. Do we, often the outcome of discovery feeds into that, but it's at a sketch kind of level, prototype, low fidelity kind of level. It might frame up the kind of requirements that we need to gather. So it actually helps to put a bit of a box around those. But, before we go into delivery, there may be a very valid analysis, requirements, technology, technical design, organizational design, process design thing that needs to go on. That is still there. It doesn't change the need for it. But as I said, it helps to inform not wasting our time on that. That, we might overinvest in requirements on something for this actually just doesn't have any value. Cool. Yeah. Follow up there. So the question was, how does this work with external customers? Do you bring discovery in after your market has indicated the need for something, or before? Before, in my opinion. It comes back to that trust in the team thing. An ideal organization, we've got a fully autonomous, fully empowered team that is following the needs of the customer for the lifetime of the product. They don't need to be told what to do, because they're spending time out there looking at what the next problem and the next problem and the next problem and the next problem. So it's actually having a conversation about roadmaps and discovery last night. And, we were talking about how, there is that fidelity of what's in front of us, but you need to focus on the 2-year view, the 5-year view as well. What might our customers need in 5 years' time? That's very valid discovery. It's just at a much higher, blurrier kind of level. And if we've got a really empowered team, we want them to be doing that work, not a bunch of wizards sort of sitting in a corner going, we should do that, and then tell the team what to do. But discovery exists at those different levels as well. We might have actually sort of fleshed out a problem, and then we're trying to research the best way to solve that problem. We might be operating at that level, or what's the most valuable problem to solve now? What's the most valuable problem to solve in 2 years' time? Was there a question online?
Yeah, I had a question. So It's more based on your experience and how you've dealt with this. So the scenario is, I've worked in smaller companies, and individual employees usually wear multiple hats. For example, a product owner could be, a product person could be a product owner, product manager, product marketer, and then an engineer could be do coding work. They could be a people lead, but also have that principal engineering hat. And I was just wondering, in terms of the quality of discovery, have you experienced a scenario where the discovery work was super high level, so high that when it got to refinement, there were a lot of questions which pushed that piece of work back into discovery because of the detail element? Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, fantastic question. Yes, and I've been guilty of this myself, creating discovery that was too high level, too surface. Spending a little bit of time thinking about how much we want to invest in discovery helps with that. Does this feel collectively to everyone like something we should spend a day on, a week on, a month on, 3 months on? And that just helps us set expectations around, how much work, how much depth we should go into for discovery. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it also helps to do the reverse, that we don't spend too much time in discovery when we're actually not just wasting our time and going too deep with that evidence. But yeah, you have to use your judgment. But getting people on the same page, assumption mapping that I was talking about earlier on, these are all techniques that can be used to flesh out the level of uncertainty. I was just been remembering, David, you and I were working on a concept called rapid learning cycles. And this is the notion where you basically map out what all your assumptions are. What are the learnings? What are the things that we need to learn? And then you prioritize them, and then you churn through that backlog of things that we need to learn. And that helps to make that really visible, like what are the things that we need to learn. It's a great framework, Google it. If you talk to David Stokes afterwards, he is the expert on it. And there's a few other frameworks around that as well. I think, Rahul, you referred to a framework in the talk last month, which was recorded online on the Mind the Product site if anyone wants to watch it. There are a few frameworks around that allow you to put a little bit of structure to how much analysis should we do, what is good enough. Yeah, great question. Thank you, Mara. Jim. I get pulled up for that all the time. So thank you, Jim. Mm. Yeah, so the comment from Jim was, there are some concept and shape up, the shape up framework around this. Absolutely. I mean, shape up draws from a bunch of really, really, really good practices, and discovery certainly is one of them. There is that shaping phase, which you sort of squinted it a bit. It does look an awful lot like discovery. The principles are all the same, and it's because it is exactly the same thing. It's just a way of putting a bit of a box around it. So another great framework to use as a reference. Thank you, Jazz. Yeah. So the question from Jazz is that how do you ensure that your designers have been involved in this? They've created a wireframe, some low fidelity prototype as part of user research, user testing, whatever. How do you avoid the perception that the design is done? Have a product manager that really cares about that stuff and who understands it. It is a good point. One thing, one technique is that I've found to sort of get around that is make sure your developers don't do high fidelity prototypes. Because high fidelity prototypes create the illusion that the design is done. You tune that fidelity level, sketches on a whiteboard, pencil on a photograph of a piece of paper with a sketch on it. Really helps to subtly drive home the message that this was just a prototype. We were just testing ideas. I'm a big fan of that low fidelity prototyping full stop, because it allows you, when you're working with users, to not have the users fixate on the pretty colors, it's fixate on the flow, the thing you're actually trying to test. So yeah, I'm really anti high fidelity prototypes at that stage. Figma is a blessing and a curse. So that is the main way. But also create that perception in the organization that this is just stuff that we're going to throw away. It's a proof of concept. We're going to throw it. One organization I worked for had the mantra that you can only call something a proof of concept if you actually throw it away. You're not allowed to, if this is something you intend to take into production, not a proof of concept. It's a pilot. It's a something else, but it's not a POC. Has to be something, throw it away. You are going to start over once you've got the evidence that you need from that thing. So it's actually really hard. And I've wrestled with that particular concept a lot where I'm like, oh, but if just extend it. No, don't. Avoid that temptation because you get into the problems that I think you're referring to, is that you think that you've done all the thinking already, but it comes back to that question from Serene around requirements that no, you haven't. You have not yet done all the thinking that you need to do. You've just gathered enough evidence to say that we're on the right track.
So I guess the scenario I'm thinking about is you do discovery, and you know all the answers. Because that whole sense of certainty, right?
Yes. Yes. So the question is, how do you avoid creating that perception of we're kind of done and we just need to get on and deliver it? I guess that's probably just very much I think Jazz was asking the same question from a different angle. It's about making sure that you've got a process where it doesn't end at discovery. There is a design phase after that. We are reducing uncertainty, but also acknowledging that actually the discovery never actually really ends, like ever in a product that has a full life cycle. You're continually discovering new things, including midway through development. Maybe you actually need to carve off an element and push that back into discovery because there's just a bunch of uncertainty around it. That sort of assumption, uncertainty mapping, learning mapping I was talking about can really help with that. Maybe we don't learn everything up front and we save some things that we need to learn as we go more into the delivery cycle. So it's about kind of being conscious of that and aware of it, and design, being deliberate around that, I think is the only answer to solving that particular problem. So. Yeah, so the comment from AJ was, how do you sort of map out that uncertainty? How do you show it with respect to product maturity? Yeah, the rapid learning cycles I was talking about before sort of does an aspect of that, but it's just make that stuff visible. Like, we are totally in the unknown, complex, complicated, scary domain. Therefore, there's a lot of unknowns, by definition, and we should spend more time in there. Versus, it's done. We not much risk here. Let's get on and do it. Of course, you're going to be wrong, but hopefully you're not wrong all the time. If you are, maybe you need to evaluate how you're doing things. I think we'll make this the last question. Thank you for giving me a follow-up slide that I'll use next time. So the comment was, if you're not being agile in discovery, you're not really doing discovery. Yeah, 100%. If you're putting too formal a framework, formal a process, if you're having slow feedback cycles in there, your discovery is not just going to work very well. You're not going to get that evidence in. You're not going to be able to iterate. You're not going to be able to churn through the different leaves of that opportunity solution tree fast enough or at all to get there. So no, 100% agree with that sentiment. Cool. I'll just give the people online an opportunity. Are there any further questions from online? Nope. All right. Thank you so much, everyone online. Thank you very much again, everyone in the room. Just a couple of announcements before we move on. So, firstly, hiring. I am hiring. I'm looking for a senior product manager for Harmony, where we do amazing discovery, as I've just talked about. I haven't sold the dream already. So no, we have a senior product manager role open there. It is a really amazing role. I am trying to recruit for it at the moment. So if you know anyone, please come and have a conversation. But it's not all about me. Is there anyone else in the room who is hiring for roles at the moment? Just me? Surely not. Jazz.
This is kind of a hard one. I'm looking for a content strategist, ideally who has experience with Adobe Experience Manager, if I'm going to be really specific. So if anyone knows anyone like that, please send them my way.
Content strategist. Any part-time or internship roles? none that immediately spring to mind, but I'm sure our audience can have a think about that and perhaps post it as a comment on the meetup page if there is something that springs to mind. Anything else? Any other roles out there? No? Cool, thank you. Right, very exciting announcement from Product Tank, which I'm going to let David Jeans speak to.
Thank you, Anthony. So yes, so Product Aotearoa have organized